Deadlock 2 Shrine Wars is the sequel to Deadlock Planetary Conquest. Came out 2 years after its predecessor way back in 1998, building upon the foundation of the first game, now adding sea bases, units, land, sea, and air, but in particular sea units, and diplomacy options. You can now ally with other races militarily, share technology, or just intelligence, along with breaking the pacts later in the game. Perhaps the biggest difference, though, is resource management. Now, buildings have different unit costs along with a technology tree that has a big impact on how the games unfold. I played it a little bit back in the day. I was turned off by the stiff 3D portrait that you had with this one. I was also playing Age of Empires 2 and StarCraft at that point, so that was probably the biggest reason why. It is available for $7 on Steam, or you can get it for $6 at GOG.com.
And what of the ancient ones? Use this planet, and we shall never.
The story is a continuation of the first game. The shrines that you find on Gallius 4 show that there is a homeworld planet for these shrines. So each race goes on its own particular conquest to find out where each of the shrines are. And new to the series, you now have campaigns for each of the races. It's pretty bare bones in reality, and they intersect. You'll have the starting points you'll see of the other races. If you play them, you will start there. And the planets that you go to, the order will be different, and it will have different parameters, such as you can't use airplanes, or you have to ally with a particular race to win the game. I picked the Raylu once again. And there's a decent amount here, though. It does add replay value. It's interesting enough to play that you will go through it, and it takes a lot of time, and it has its own unique parameters for them. So it's interesting enough to add replay value. It's not a basic tacked on thing. But like as for graphics, they have basic graphics showing what's going on between each of the missions, and then there's a cutscene unique to each one at the end. Biggest change you'll notice right off the bat is now you can build sea bases along with a lot more sea units. You only had the carrier, dreadnought, and transport before, but now you have destroyers, submarines, a sea corps that is used like a command corps, and then the air one as well, along with the sea bases. So here, this changes it up quite a bit. Along with the technology, there's an impact of having a base that will affect your ability to control the sea. Along with this, now when you enter combat, it's random. You'll have groups of your army in different points on the map, or even on top of each other sometimes. That rarely happens. They're usually start in the middle, and then you're on one or two sides for most of the time. It still is, at its core, a turn-based strategy game. I won't go into the base mechanics. If you want to learn more about those, you can check out my other video where I cover Deadlock. But that part is the same. The difference is the complexity, and more importantly, the cost and the type of resources you need for the buildings. That massively changes the direction, how you will build up your base. First, though, looking at the sea platforms that you build. You have 4 slots. You now have you have flak for air, torpedo for sea. You can only build those two as there are no land units to attack, apart from the one that goes onto the land and the ocean, but they're on the ocean. And then you have things that, like the kelp for food or for power. So enough is covered in culture and the base building itself if you want them to be happy. What sets the sequel apart from the first game, though, now the exploits are gone. And I should know, I used all of them to raise taxes to get more money. You can easily do that building up your population early on, no matter which race you are. A lot more you have to manage now. You got to build more farms for the wood. You now need wood to build houses. And then the technologies are also limited. You need certain technologies to go to the next one, to go to the next one. So your progress, you got to make real choices now. There isn't a one path like there was before. Management of the buildings is better once you get used to it. It takes a while because you have to click on each section now, but at least you can go to your house population and then move it over to what you want to do. It's a pain at first, but I don't have the worn out index finger. This time around, I mean, unless you're playing for a long time, but there seems to be less clicking overall. Now there are some new buildings like the hospital, which you'll need also to maintain morale, and the cloning center being another one. But really, for the game, if you take nothing else away from it, the economy side of this is a lot different now and requires much more attention. It's not near as easy as it was in the first game. Military too has a lot of differences. The biggest being how you stack all of the units. You now don't have any limitation. You won't lose so many tanks or so many infantry. It was 2, 4, and 3. Like for the planes, you can put as many as you want. Also, along with this, now they've made it sort of easier. At first, it's a pain, kind of like with the buildings, but once you get used to it, you get a sense of where to click and where to go, and they automatically attack units, so that makes it simpler too. Besides there being new technologies altogether, now there is a tech tree. You see the technologies on the left. I need to research that one, and that branches off to which ones I can then research after that. And this gets a little bit bigger. So again, like with jumping your economy up by just building more population. Same thing with technology. You can't get to the ones you want right away. You got to plan it out more. And this is streamlined though. You can pick one after another. You don't have to constantly go back. I can pick several, and you'll see the number for each one going up. But this is a great change as well because it forces you to focus on specific technologies and have a specific strategy. Whereas before it was straightforward. You kind of go along the same path if you're looking to boom or if you're looking to do economy. That's about as complex as it got with the first game. The black market skirning make a return. Also, another exploit, sometimes the biggest one and one that you would always use with the first one. This one has been modified too. You can call them, but they may come the next turn or not, or it may take a little bit longer. Most importantly, though, they don't buy every resource. They only buy certain resources, and they want less of them the farther you get into the game, being only art when you get into the late game. You now have diplomacy in this game where you can have military treaties, or technology, or just general intelligence. And the AI does a good job of breaking contracts when it's not useful for them. This is probably where they are the smartest, and it is set up well too. You don't just get all the technologies by joining a pact. You only get the ones after that per turn. And they leave you too, and the same thing with the military. They'll do that as well. Otherwise, in terms of resource management and military, they're not too good. Similar to before. The difference, though, is the parameters make them more effective because they can ally with each other and then they can attack you in mass. And then with how it works with building up units, they can defend themselves better because you can have 20 or more units in a single territory to defend. There's a negative to this. I had a large game, where I had many units, but they would spread them out too far. So I got to an area where you can cut off one territory, which is satisfying in of itself because then you don't have to attack them. You see the colonists revolt. But that's kind of the name of the game, though, is it's that resource management while you are attacking each territory, deciding what to do. To really test out the AI, I did a custom scenario, which was the only option in the other game. You now have 3 victory conditions, which is a great change. You can now do only conquest. You don't have to worry about city centers, manifest destiny, which is either conquest or city centers, and then shrine wars, where you just have to capture the shrines for a period of time. You now have player skill level in this, which is hog-tied to supercharge like you did in the main screen for the AI, but this is for yourself. This is not a good change. You can still ally with it. You can remove that setting if you want, but all this does is make your resource collection and building up very slow, which is a huge artificial difficulty sort of a way to implement, and it shows how bad the AI is. I played a game with the Chit-Chit, and they beat me eventually. It took many turns, but it is just excruciatingly slow to get your resources. So it's that type of a challenge, and it's more boring. I'd rather have them beat me by allying with each other or stealing technology, things like that. But it's mainly that. The AI was a bit disappointing. And just to give you an idea, if you see in this scenario how many angry colonists there are in the right next to me, the Raylu, and this is just purely from poor resource management. Also, in other games that I've played, buildings wouldn't be completed and they would kind of sit there. Then if I took them out and I didn't take over a city, they were built back more efficiently, but they don't destroy their own buildings to compensate for what's there. They leave the buildings that are there. But this game came out in 98, so AI is kind of to be expected to be around that time. The help menu makes a return, and while we're on this, you can see in the portrait profile picture, just the mouth kind of jabbers, the rest doesn't move around. Same kind of thing as before, except we have more technologies, more buildings. But along with this, the units themselves, the commands are a lot better. The attack unit command makes it a lot easier. You don't have to individually click each of the units. And you can now do group click for the same type of units, or all of them. Pretty sure Net Accolade isn't around anymore, but the multiplayer function is here, or you can do it through LAN. So theoretically, I couldn't do this, of course. You should be able to connect someone else if you have their specific TCP address. It does show up. You can either start a game or you can join a game. It shows modem and the other functions there. So there may be a way to do this. I wasn't able to. If you are able to and you have played this game, please let us all know in the comments below. But it is theirs, but it's a theoretical type of a thing where you can punch in the address, and it should work if you do have your friend's address to join. Like with the first game, I do recommend Deadlock 2, and it is better in basically every way than the first game. The only negative is the FMV cutscenes, and the interface I got used to. It's basically about the same once you played a bit. I thought it was different at first, but it's really just the cutscenes. But most importantly, the sound works. Everything works for the game. There is a complicated path you have to go through to play this on Steam. So I'm sure through GOG, besides being $1 cheaper, you don't have to mess with that. I will put the link in the description below in how I got that to work. But just overall with the game, everything is tweaked and balanced with the resources, so it is more challenging and you have to think more to build up your economy and decide what to do. And you have more options along with that, with more types of units, and at the same time not messing with the useless commands where you have to individually click. You can mass click, and then it makes it a lot easier once you play the game. You play a few games or so, then you get a sense of how to go to each building, where to put each of the colonists, and the same thing with the units too. They're kind of tricky to click on at first, but then you have an easier time after doing a half dozen games or so. I recommend playing the first one though first, see if you like that one, and then jumping to this one as it is more complicated. And you're not losing anything. It builds upon the first game. If you liked this video, please give a like. If you really liked it, please subscribe. Check out the links below if you are picking this up and getting the game to work, and I will see you next time.